Hey guys, I just wanted to say thank you all for joining us. My name is Ryan Bailey, and we are here with our first Fostering Your Faith Bible study. It's a new program that we're getting going, and as we begin, I felt it only right to give proper introductions to some of the leaders a part of this program, and also, more importantly, the CEO and founder, Lacey Bailey, will be able to share her faith. So the first few weeks, we're going to share our stories with you, beginning with me, and we will be able to enlighten you on a little bit of the struggles that we've went through, the things we've overcome, and share the testimony of how God came through and pulled us out of the darkness. And so we just want to thank you guys for being here. Like I said, my name is Ryan Bailey, and I am happy to be able to share a little bit about my story with you about God and all that He's done in my life. The more I understand his sovereignty and will in coordination with that he has in over each of our lives. And so at a very young age, I ended up at a Christian daycare, which is out of context for my family. My mom wasn't Christian. There was no real church basis going on. And so for me to end up at a Christian daycare happened to be, I think, more circumstantial than anything, but God had a plan in terms of what he was doing. And so at a young age, I really understood, because of the way he was introduced, God's father figure like position over each of our lives. I knew that he was in control of everything. He had given up his son to save us so that we could have a life of peace and prosperity with him, even through the struggles. And so I really looked at God as the father figure that they were teaching him, just like a kid would with a father, and vice versa, that I knew I was growing with him, and so on and so forth. And it was really beneficial for me to be have gained a relationship with him at that age, because from there I decided to kind of take things into my own hands. And throughout all of that, and we'll get to it, there was a lot of lessons learned that he was able to teach me as he was walking alongside me through some of these storms. And so ultimately, what kind of set my story into a hard life lesson learned situation is when I was 13, my grandpa, who was my best friend, my father figure, everything, he passed away. And looking to God and understanding his sovereignty, I knew God had allowed it to happen. There are things that happen outside of God's desired will. There's actually three concepts to God's will. There's his sovereign will, his desired will, and his descriptive will, which is, based on the Bible. And so a lot of what happens in our choices might be outside of God's desired will. He desires that none should perish and all should have everlasting life, but ultimately that's left in our hands because of free choice and the relationship that he wants us to come into willingly. And so within all that, I was looking at God, understanding his sovereignty, but felt betrayed because I felt that he took my grandpa away from me at a really pivotal time in my life. I didn't have a real father figure. I'd never really met him. And so my grandpa was that really stable role model that I needed, at that time. And it was a really pivotal time for me. 13 is a young age. You're starting to, get into puberty, everything else. The transitions are changing, everything else. So it was a point in my life that it felt like it broke everything that I needed. And so I blamed God. And from that, my choices started following as such. I started kind of making decisions thinking that it didn't really matter. God didn't really care. I knew he was there. I knew he loved us, but I was just young and angry, just like a teenager would at a parent that told them they couldn't go out to a party on Friday night and doors are getting slammed and everything else. I mean, it was a temper tantrum along those same lines, but it really affected my outlook on what I was doing in my life and the choices that I was making. It made me feel more alone in my struggles. And so, at the same point, looking at what was going on, the devil really decided to come in and try to wreak havoc in that time frame of my life. My father, who I said I had never known, he decided to come back into my life. He was around for about 6 months, made a bunch of promises, and then disappeared again. My mom's ex-husband, who had just gone through a big divorce and had been dealing with that for the last couple of years, that was havoc just to live through in itself. And then my mom's new husband had some issues that would come out when he was drinking. It'd slam me around a little bit, things like this. But all this was all happening within a year time span. And so I was just internally becoming more and more broken because I felt God had abandoned me. And then I felt like my dad, who had abandoned me to begin with, came around, promised things, and abandoned me. My mom's ex-husband and all that really turned into a bigger issue. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But basically, everybody that was important in my life felt like they were turning their back on me. And so what was, from my adolescent standpoint, what was a different thing? What was any different than what God was doing? I felt he took my grandpa, he had let me live through all these hard situations. And so really my worldview became, I needed to look out for myself because nobody really cares about you. And so nobody really loves you. And so the devil built a stronghold within me that said, you're unlovable, you can't be loved, it's just not worth it, nobody really cares. And so I started sheltering myself off inside so I could protect myself from other people hurting, whether they came, left, all that kind of stuff. I just built a worldview that was based on the devil's lies. And so within all that, I made decisions that ended up leading me into a whole bunch of trouble. My mom's ex-husband, who had gotten a divorce, and we had dealt with that for a few years, I had still had a working relationship with him at the time. And ultimately he was out of town for a while, and being an adolescent, and I was about 14 at this time, 15, and he was out of town. And so of course it was a nice place to go skip school and just kind of be a kid, and of course wrong decisions, but they were decisions at the time that seemed seemingly unimportant and innocent enough. We had no ill will, no bad intentions, except we didn't want to go to school that day. But one thing leads to another, as it does most of the time when you're young and free and don't have anybody watching over your shoulder. We took the boat to the lake and took his van for a ride and rode his motorcycle around, and just a whole bunch of really poor decisions looking back on it. But that stemmed a situation that carried on within my life for years after that. And ultimately, through that situation, at 15, I landed myself with 5 felonies and $50,000 restitution. And so I'm looking at a life where I feel nobody loves me. God is there, but he doesn't really care. And now my life is completely over, because who at 15 years old has $50,000 to pay anybody? And then on top of that, you add 5 felonies and everything the world tells you about being a felon and being broken, and how you're never going to get a job, and you're always going to fail, and everybody's always going to judge you. So by 15, my worldview was, well, it's all over. Nobody cares. Let's just kind of do what I need to do to survive and enjoy myself the best way that I can, and just try to find some happiness in all the chaos, because the chaos seemed random and not important, and just the same hurt that I would feel seemed unimportant to other people. And so it just kind of left me in a situation where I felt alone in the world, even though I was surrounded by people. And that stronghold that told me that I was unlovable really took a hold in my life. And so all the people I started surrounding myself with were all getting a semi facade of who I was. I needed them to like me. And so I would figure out who they were, adapt myself to kind of that situation, so I could be the more glorified and exciting and fun me around them, so that they would like me. Because if the people around me didn't like me, I had no self-worth. I needed their love because I felt unlovable. And so I took off with the fact that I felt like my adult life was over, $50,000 in debt and 5 felonies. So, what can I even do to get out of this situation or try to enjoy any kind of life? I'm thinking I could never get a credit card even, or anything. And so by the time I was 19, after living through some years of brokenness and probation and all that stuff that kind of coincides, I ended up landing a job working at a strip club at security. And so that fed pretty much every evil worldly desire you could kind of live off of. It was a constant party. There was, this and things always going around. And so like for me, trying to find self-worth in the world and doing it by making people around me because I could be good at partying and having fun, this was a perfect environment for me, but it's all fake. Nobody there really cares. What's there today is gone tomorrow. And so all the relationships that were being built were superficial, but each choice I made with all these strongholds and things in effect kept leading to more trouble, the constant drinking and partying and everything else. I drank myself right into an alcoholic. And ultimately by, age 30, I'm
including the 5 felonies from when I was a kid, I've probably got five DUIs at that point, which in Montana, where I live now, is a felony. And so you add that one to that. And so basically you can kind of get an idea of how I was choosing to live my life, not intentionally bad or trying to do anything to out hurt anybody, but I was trying to find anything I could to make myself feel worthy of actually being here and feeling like I had a purpose, or, you know, I had any point to any of it. And so it was a lot of years of a lot of dark moments and a lot of struggle and a lot of time sitting in a jail cell, wondering what's going on, or, you know, how am I ever going to come out of this, or what my life even looks like in the future. And so it was just a lot of brokenness, a lot of self-doubt, worthlessness, and it just really gave me an understanding of what our world is experiencing. There's so much pain and so much destruction, and so many people hurting people out there that it becomes debilitating to try to find hope and peace in the middle of all the chaos, let alone find purpose in it. But God, having introduced himself to me at such a young age, he was with me every step of the way. He, knowing where we're going to go, he knows every hair we have on our head. He knows he goes before us, he's behind us. You know, he tells us not to worry about anything because he's got our food, our clothes, all these things. He will completely take care of us. But with our decisions and the things that we choose to do and carry on, and how that, you know, turns into a developed life with him, is he allows things that we walk ourselves into to teach us lessons, or to give us understanding, or whatever the reason it is. From his perspective, he chooses to allow us to experience some of this stuff. And so he, every time I went to jail, he really opened my eyes to see that he was kind of putting me in timeout. So I really feel that through all my brokenness and through all the years I spent bringing it on myself and walking myself into broken situations, every time he put me in timeout, he was slowing me down and getting my concentration back onto him. And so, yeah, I got myself in a whole bunch of trouble, and I led myself into a whole bunch of broken situations, and I hurt people along the way. But God had a purpose in what he was going to do with me and with my experience later. And so that's where, you know, fighting the good fight of faith, and, you know, like James 1 says, we find joy when various trials begin, is because through this experience, I find that we gain power. We gain power to help a broken world that is struggling right now. The devil has the world in chaos and in a stranglehold, and he's doing everything he can to try to break and hurt and hinder everybody and every relationship he can. And so with what God allowed me to walk myself into, and with all the broken situations that I, you know, allowed to happen and experienced, now it comes with a developed understanding of what the world is still experiencing today. And so I find great joy that God reached into my life when he did, because throughout the years of the brokenness that I experienced, he helped give me little pieces of understanding throughout the whole process, that as I got older, settled down, decided I was tired of trouble, tired of just everything, he wanted me to be able to take that understanding and make something good out of it, turn it into joy, turn it into peace, and give the pain a purpose. And so, of course, me still being broken, as most of us are, we make decisions, whether even with the best intention. As I turned 30, I ended up meeting my wife, Lacey Bailey, who's the founder of Foster Kids United. And so I told her from the very get-go that, hey, look, I'm an alcoholic. This is all the trouble I've been in. At that point in my life, I'm, you know, 6 DUIs down, you know, a couple felonies, things like this, stuff when I was younger. So I flat out told her, if I start drinking, just leave. I know that what drinking does to change my priorities. And so I tried to really lay it out to her on what was going on. And so we lived a couple years of, I would say, worldly Christian kind of life. We went to church on Sundays, you know, our life was going good. I just worked full time. I worked for the 9th biggest rhino liner in the country as a lead spray technician. I mean, life was not bad, but we didn't have our focus on the Lord. I knew who the Lord was, and obviously I had plenty of years to kind of develop my understanding with him and build a relationship. Because like I said, time out, every time I went to jail and I spent a lot of time at time out, he used that time to get to know me and to introduce himself to me. And so we continue to grow throughout the years. And so even now within this whole situation where my Lacey and I are, we're going to church and we're doing all this stuff, but we're still focused on the world. We're looking at the world for what it can give us and how it can help us through our struggles and the storms, and everything was debilitating and we can't pay bills and, you know, all the life stuff that's just everywhere and constant all day long. We were dealing with that, but with a half full cup relationship with God. And so we dealt with all the struggles in a worldly way. We stressed out, we had sleepless nights and, you know, all these kind of things because we let the problems and the devil overtake the dialogue and everything that was going on instead of surrendering it to God. And so we were doing good in a worldly-ish Christian way. And so within that, and so many years of doing good, we decided that, hey, you know, what does a couple drinks here and there hurt? What can this hurt? We're going to do it in the right way. Everything will be taken care of. And so we started doing that on like holidays. You know, we'd make sure that we didn't have to run around or do any errands or anything else like that, because, you know, DUIs obviously are off the table. And so we're trying to make the best decisions we can and do everything the right way and still try to have a little fun and enjoy ourselves and whatever. And ultimately, those seemingly unimportant decisions led me right back into the same chaos and the same brokenness that I had been walking myself into for years and years and years. And so this one was a different kind of experience though. For one, the day I got arrested, I don't know how else to explain it except to tell people that I was not in control. No matter how much I yelled at myself, no matter how forceful I was trying to be, I had no physical control over what I was doing. It was like I was watching a movie behind myself and I couldn't do anything no matter what I said or how loud I said it. And it was after a night of drinking. You know, we went out, birthday party, all that kind of stuff at a brother's house. And so I ended up staying the night there to drive back the next day. But here I am, like not in control, freaking out, knowing what can come and what kind of trouble this can bring and all that. And so ultimately I ended up getting arrested. And being and having the relationship with God that I did for years, this kind of twisted me up for a minute because I didn't understand what was going on and how God could allow something like this on something I felt like I had no control over. I felt like he had almost put me in jail on purpose. And that was a devastating feeling. The first couple of days I was in jail, like I told the COs, I didn't want to be alive anymore. Like if this is my life, I'm never going to get any better. I just tried to be better the last couple of years, but this is miserable. I'm never going to be any different. I'm just a miserable person that can't do anything right. And so I told the COs, I'm not suicidal. I don't want to kill myself, but I definitely don't want to be alive anymore. And that's when God really, really stepped in and grabbed a hold of everything he had ever taught me all the way back from when I was a child. And so what he did is, in the midst of what was the biggest storm I've ever seen in my life, we were looking at a 20-year sentence. Lacey is thinking I'm gone and gone to prison, and she is going to move back home to Montana where her family is. And so she's packing up and leaving and all this. And so we're looking at a very, very dead situation. And God stepped in and said, hey, this looks worse on paper. And I don't know if you guys understand what paper in a short context means, but the paperwork from court. He was telling me internally, yes, the whole world's going to tell you this situation is broken and it's bad, but I'm here to show you that it's something different. He showed me through this broken process that he was with me there and I was there for a purpose. Sometimes the pain and the circumstances we have real purpose in them. Sometimes we just don't have the understanding of what that means. And so, there might be a time we don't get that until Jesus returns. You know, his ways are higher than our ways. He has an understanding on how the ripple effect and the things that we do or the things that we experience or the testimonies that we gain affect the world around us. And we're called to plant seeds and water those seeds, but real change in each person's life is up to the Holy Spirit and God working within us. I don't have the power to change myself. I tried that. I watched myself fail really bad to the point that I was looking at my life is over. But God stepped in and said, no, this is all for a purpose, and I'm giving it to you for a purpose. And so that was a hard pill to swallow that I didn't quite understand at first, And so this all within a 6-month time was like, I would say like seasonal boot camp for football players, 2-a-days or something. It was intense. God was in my face all the time, regardless of how frustrated I was getting at it. And there were points that I threw my Bible down because I'm so upset, so devastated, looking at the chaos and all the world around me and a 20-year sentence and everything else. And all I had was this promise from God that said, it looks worse on paper. Trust me. And so I'm looking at the brokenness and the chaos, absolutely devastated and ready to give up. But he was there trying to show me and give me the perspective that there was going to be purpose throughout it all. But to me, it was over. And so I throw my Bible down. I'm never picking this up again. You're not worth it. This is all not worth it. I can't do this. And you must not be real. Or, everything that the devil feeds us and that we entertain because it sounds like half truths. And, it just kind of seems to make sense that here I am, a life where I felt like I've known God for a long time, and at that point, I didn't understand that I didn't have a full cup relationship with God. I didn't know I was running on half a cup because I didn't know what real surrender meant. And so this is where God stepped in and not only changed my life, but he changed my wife's life, and he changed the mission that is carrying me on for the future endeavors. And so basically through the whole situation and my devastation, God gave me an equation, which then turned into a book. The equation comes acceptance plus trust equals faith, but it equals out to a formula for God-given peace. Right there, I put that in the title, formula for God-given peace, because I don't know, have anywhere else or have any idea how else to describe it. And so that is what carried me through that broken storm. And that broken storm, within all that and me learning to surrender and what surrender looked like, God gave me a promise, a written prophecy that told me exactly how everything was going to be rectified, exactly how I was going to get my wife back, exactly how my family was going to be restored, just like Job in the Old Testament. Everything had been taken from me, and I felt like I wasn't in control for the one to put me there. And so I was blaming God for that. But starting to gain more understanding of the devil and how spiritual warfare works, it was the game-changing situation for me that led to the equation. The equation eventually led to the book, but the prophecy is what changed my perspective on God's truth and trusting in his promises. But it's what opened the door for Lacey to completely understand that God is real and his sovereign purpose will always prevail and that he does love us. And so we really gained a solid development and a strong relationship with God because of the brokenness that we experienced. Lacey, my wife, she's got a newer relationship with God that's carried on and grown very strongly over the last couple of years. Me, I look at my situation knowing that I met God when I was a kid, and looking at all the brokenness I experienced when I was in those moments, you couldn't see or understand how God could be a part of any of it. Looking back, and hindsight's always 20/20, looking back, I can't see how I didn't understand how God was a part of it all. That power that comes from the brokenness that we understand, that ability to go out into the world and look at somebody that's experiencing something similar and just letting them know, hey, I understand what you're going through, and hey, you are not alone, can be the open door that saves that person's life. The more brokenness we've experienced and the more we learn to give that back to God, the more power we have into changing and giving a helping hand to this broken world that the devil is trying to disintegrate from the inside out. We have power from the brokenness we've experienced. And I know that's hard to interpret or want to digest sometimes because some of our broken situations are very debilitating. The pain that we felt, the struggle, the tears, all of it is debilitating. So to look at that and try to be like, yes, God allowed this to happen, but he was there with me. It might take some digesting just to try to walk yourselves through some of those processes, because trauma is exactly that, trauma. It is hard to understand, but that's what the devil thrives off of. And the more we keep the trauma in that box of trauma and we don't give it up and give it to God where he can turn it into power, it keeps us under the thumb of the devil. That's where he comes in and he whispers things in our ears. And, we have strongholds about trusting people or trusting relationships because the pain and struggle we felt in the past. These are all things that the devil can use as ammo against us, the more we hold on to them and hold on to that pain. And that's why, the Bible talks so strongly about forgiveness. We forgive our brothers 70 times 7, because it's not about setting them free. It's about setting ourselves free. And so with everything that I've ever experienced, I don't see it as bad days any longer. I don't have regrets in the form of regrets like people would talk about it. I have things and look back on situations where I do wish I hadn't caused that pain and I wish they hadn't felt that. But there's also situations where I've been through where somebody did something to me and I wish they hadn't done that because I don't want to feel that pain and that experience. But looking at what God has done with it now, that pain and that experience gives me more power to help the world. So I don't look at my past as broken, bad, or devil ridden. I look at it as lessons learned that God helped walk me through that gives me more power than a person who's been in church for 60 years out of their life. Don't get me wrong, that person has power, they have biblical knowledge, they have a relationship with God, but the world that is broken most of the time just simply needs somebody that they know understands. It makes them not alone in the storm. And that can be the biggest game changer for helping someone else understand that there's light at the end of the tunnel. And so I would say cherish the bad days, cherish the broken times that you've experienced, not in a way that, you know, yay for me, but those have power in them. So when James 1, you know, James 1, when he talks about find various joy when trials begin, I can now look at that and understand what he means, because now those trials, they either are bringing on a lesson or a blessing, or God's trying to show me something or remove something bad out of my life that he doesn't want there anymore. But he's in control of it all. There are things that happen outside of his desired will, because like I said, he desires that everybody should have everlasting life and nobody should perish, but nothing happens outside of his sovereign will. And so if he allowed it to happen, then there's some purpose in it, because he's not going to let us struggle for no reason at all. He's not going to give the devil complete free reign to terrorize all of us past the point of death. He wants us and is with us through everything. And that's why he sent Jesus. That's why the Holy Spirit is with us today, is because yes, we will experience trials. The Bible tells us that too. We will experience these things, but with the understanding that God is with us and gives us purpose and power through them, I feel now we can start walking and gaining different understanding through the brokenness that is going to come. You know, tomorrow's a new day. I don't know what it's going to bring, but for me, I live an ATF lifestyle, and acceptance plus trust equaling faith. I fight the good fight of faith, and absolutely everything that's coming up against me, whether a blessing or a lesson or a trial or a pain, I simply ATF it. I live an ATF lifestyle that surrenders everything to the feet of God, at the foot of Christ, at the bottom of the cross. And I say, okay, God, I'm going to look at this as what you're trying to teach me, how I can help somebody, whether I can be a burden or a blessing and a part of the situation. And I just simply walk in absolute peace with God, because of all the brokenness I've experienced with him has shown me that he really has the power to walk us through it. And so I'm really grateful that we're here. As we continue to develop Fostering Your Faith Bible study, we'll get into more Bible studies and, you know, actually talk about real lessons and things like that. And we'll have the ability to ask some questions, and we'll put together some ways that you guys can interact with me. And so if you guys have really important questions or want some one-on-one time, I'm more than willing to sit down and talk to you about it. I guess to give you a little context of who I am also, through all the felonies, through all the brokenness, through all the bad jobs and everything else that I've lived through, I'm now a 4.0 student at Colorado Christian University. Like I said, I've written the book on faith. There is a lot that what God has been doing within my life. And so I'm not just somebody that found a Bible and said, yay, I'll help you. I'm somebody that has gone through the brokenness, understand the Bible, and now am seeking higher degrees and everything else that go along with that. And so I am willing to answer and walk through the questions with you, whether I have the answer or not. We can search out those answers together. And so